What's up, everybody? Here we are again, another series in our ENCORE Education videos. So thanks for joining us. We're in, as I said, a series, and this is with Dan Allison. I'll reintroduce him in a minute, but we're talking about something that I think is near and dear to all of us that have businesses that are growing, which is how do we grow our businesses by way of referrals? That's what we've been talking about, and we're going to continue to talk about. Real quick, I'll remind everybody, we've got Elliot Bassett, Chief Operating Officer of Ellerbrock-Norris on the call. You've got me, Andy Bassett. I'm the president of Ellerbrock-Norris. And again, I'll reintroduce Dan in just a second. But as I said, the last couple videos, we talked about current client relationships and how to cultivate that to get referrals. Now we're going to kind of shift to how do we bring on new clients and new relationships and get those expectations built from the beginning to have it the most favorable relationship for referrals to be natural. And Dan's going to talk about three main elements that need to exist in that relationship. So we're excited about that. But Dan is with us again. Thank you, Dan. Dan Allison's the founder and president of the Feedback Marketing Group. They consult organizations all over the country on just this. How do we grow our businesses by way of taking advantage of referrals with our top clients, our top relationships, so we can grow our businesses, the way we want to grow our businesses. And so this is Dan's world. He's the expert. Dan, I'm going to turn it over to you to dive into the first element of the three.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys, again for having me. I feel like we're old buddies at this point.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so we talked a lot on the other a couple of sessions about when you have current clients, how do you engage them in a way that is likely to lead to them referring? But a lot of times that involves the companies we work with around the country, around the world, really. We end up working with these companies and they're having to go back to their clients and start to implement this stuff. But there's a really important phase when somebody becomes a client for the first time. How do you tee that relationship up in a way that's likely to lead to solve the problem that you already have, which is we didn't engage them in the right way the first time. So yeah, today I want to talk about a conversation that I recommend any business owner have with a client when they become a client of their firm, to make sure the relationship kind of kicks off in the right way. To implement the things we talked about on the other things once they've been a client for a while.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And I'll jump in, sorry, because I think a way that I've framed this in my mind is kind of like we've talked about the reactive piece of how do you reactively train your clients to get referrals, or if they come to you and say, hey, I've given your name out to 3 people in the last 30 days. Did they call you? How to reactively handle those situations so that you can increase your chances of actually having that person get in touch with you and get the help they need. So this then I equate to kind of being that proactive step of saying from the start, let's set this up with our client proactively the right way and get on the same page with them. And so that's kind of how I've framed it in my mind, which I think just helps articulate. If folks haven't watched the first 2 episodes of this series, I think it's really good to get that reactive nature, because that's certainly where a lot of us live in right now. Is it's going to be training our current clients who have never really had this conversation how to do it, but now moving forward with new clients, I think that's what's going to be perfect for this conversation.
Yeah, Elliot, you nailed it. And I think the other 2 segments we did in isolation, they're great. There's action items in both. I think all 3 of these together is excellent. And this is kind of like a Quentin Tarantino movie where we began at the end and now we're going back to the beginning.
Yeah.
So I mentioned on one of the calls that my origin was the mental health field, clinical and behavioral psychology. And so when somebody became a client of my firm, they were making a decision to literally turn over the care of their child to my company. Those kids lived in our facilities. So that was a big decision. And I would argue that while that's a big decision, anybody who chooses Ellerbrock-Norris over somebody else or whatever business somebody's looking at, you have competition. They've maybe looked at the competition and for whatever reason, they landed on you, right? Mm-hmm. And so every company has a moment where the client was a prospect. We took them through whatever process of decision-making they had to go through to decide, you know what, and I'll use you guys as an example, you know, Ellerbrock-Norris, I'm going to land here. I'm choosing you guys to insure my companies, my facilities, my, you know, equipment, my cars, all the stuff. You guys are it. So everybody kind of that owns a business has that moment where when that person walks out of my office, they are officially a client of our firm. And I had that moment. I've had that moment in all the companies I've owned over my lifetime. And I have had the same kind of, I call it kind of a 5-minute conversation at the very end of that meeting every time. And I would encourage people listening to this to consider doing the same. So before they left my office, I would focus on 3 things. So I would tell them, you know, you've made a really important choice here to trust us to help you in this area, whatever this area is. And I told them, you know, I want you to understand that our company has 3 overarching kind of big objectives with the way that we have a relationship with our clients. Okay, there are 3. We're going to have all the details with your business and how we help you and all those things, but 3 big things. So I told them my number 1 objective is always going to be that we want to provide such a good experience to you that you would never consider using somebody else for what we do. Now, that sounds like such a simple statement, and Elliot, and you've heard me say before, it sounds so simple. We want your experience to be so good you would never want to leave. But I'll tell you, as we talked about on the other calls, we've interviewed thousands of clients. And I tell you, every company we talk to, they tell us, you know, our retention is good. We have 95% retention, 98%, whatever. But when I go into the client base and I begin to interview them about their experience, a lot of these companies are retaining marginally satisfied clients. They're not upset, so they're not trying to replace the company. So they're not like, oh, Ellerbrock-Norris is terrible. You know, we're looking elsewhere. They're not in that mode. But when they talk about their experience, it's not this beaming, raving fan, this is awesome type of deal. And as we talked about on other calls, every single client is very different in how they define what that experience looks like. So I told my clients, you know, my number 1 objective as a company is to give you an experience that's so good you would never want to leave. However, as a client of our firm, you're the only person who can teach us exactly how to do that. So one of the things that's important to us as a company is we like to engage our clients in feedback sessions frequently. So I may reach out to you in 12 months or 18 months. And rather than a normal, you know, sit down, review all your stuff, you know, I may ask you for 20 or 30 minutes of time completely to learn about your experience. I'll come prepared with the right questions to learn about what we're doing well, the areas that we hope to be delivering value. You know, are we delivering on that? But also, I'm going to ask you tough questions, like what kind of things could we do differently or better to make your experience improve. And I always told them, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10, if your experience is a 7 or a 6, we have to have the kind of relationship where you feel comfortable teaching me what 7, 8, 9, and 10 are. Because as a company, what we work so hard to earn the trust that you've shown to even say yes to us. But we don't want to stop there. We want to make sure that we continually drive that experience up. So the first objective was experience so good you never want to leave, but acknowledging as a client, you're the only person who can teach us how to do that. So I would ask your commitment. If we ask you, so that gives you a backdoor if you end up not, for some reason, asking that client, but that you'll participate, be honest, be transparent. And a good example of this, Elliot, is, you know, my industry, my former industry, the mental health field, there was a 60% turnover rate within 3 years. Meaning, if you think about that, that means a parent with a child who had schizophrenia would put their kid in a facility, which is a huge decision. And the number 1 thing for those kids is stability, not bouncing them around all over the place. 6 out of 10 times. Within 3 years, they would take the kid out of the facility because it was that bad, and they would move them to another facility. And the company that we owned, I think almost 5.5 years we had it, we had 0. We didn't lose one single.
Wow.
We're in a 60%. And I honestly believe it is because we continually open that window for our clients to talk to us about their experience and how do we improve it. And we genuinely meant it. We didn't, it wasn't, a sales tactic.
Yeah.
We actually cared. So anyways, that was the first thing.
So along that line, do you think that there's almost something like psychologically with your clients, when you have these upfront conversations and you kind of lay that groundwork, that it changes their, I don't know if I know the right word, but it changes almost their perspective of the relationship. So now they're looking for things to drive or what drives a great experience. And in a lot of regards, sometimes that's scary to salespeople or to service people, in the service industry, that say, well, shoot, I don't want them, thinking about whether or not I'm doing a good job. But at the end of the day, if you have a good model, if you're doing the right things, most clients feel like they have a great experience, but they don't think about it that way. They just think like, oh, that's how everybody does it. Like, oh, yeah, I'm happy. Like they're marginally satisfied. But do you think that like there's almost that psychology with your clients to say, hey, I want you thinking about this, and I want you actively thinking about whether you're satisfied or not, and then I want to have that discussion about where we could improve if you're not a 10 out of 10 satisfied.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does, Elliot. I think there's two components to that. Number one is the vulnerability of the professional, which is important. I can't tell I always tell my clients that you have to be willing to learn that you're not what your glossy brochure says you are. I mean, you know what I mean? You can print whatever you want. Your website can be whatever. But if the delivery of that experience is not on point with what you claim to do, nothing matters when it comes to this stuff. So number one, you got to be vulnerable enough to genuinely want the feedback. And if you look at whether it's a marriage, a business partnership, it doesn't matter. Communication is all there is. And if they don't feel comfortable in that regard, you lost a huge opportunity. But secondly, you mentioned psychologically, think about the important. All most people want is to feel important. Like nobody hates hearing you're important to me. Like whether it's a spouse or a client, like you matter to me and you're important and your happiness means a lot to us. So there's psychologically, you're bringing on a client that came to you for one reason. Somebody else did not make them feel important.
Yes.
Right. Or the prospective firms that they looked at besides yours, for some reason you differentiated. And so I think there couldn't be a better first impression than to say and mean that this is going to be an important part of our relationship. So yeah, you nailed it.
Okay. So how about then number two, your second objective that you'd have in that conversation?
Yeah. So I told them the second objective, and we alluded to some of this on the last calls where the average client does not understand all the services that are available through any given firm. So if I asked Ellerbrock-Norris's client, write me a comprehensive list of everything you do, well, let's be honest, it wouldn't be a comprehensive list of everything you do. But if I asked you to, you'd crush it. It'd be, ENCORE is amazingly robust system for all the things you do. But so I was the same in the mental health field. We didn't just have a facility for your kids. We did marital counseling. A lot of times there were challenges in the marriage when you have a child with a mental health issue. We did financial counseling. So we had all these other things that I wanted to make sure if my client ever wanted those things, they came to us, not a competitor. So I said my first objective, experience so good you never want to leave. And then I explained that. Second objective, I said, is that I want to make sure that if you ever have a need, a problem, or a concern that we are able to address, that you come to us for that. I want you to utilize all the services that we provide. But the problem with that is things that you do not need today, you may need in 6 months. Your needs and your concerns are going to change over time. But you're not going to understand all the things that we do because we do a lot of things. So I said, my second objective, I want to make sure you use us for all the things that you might need, or people you care about use us for things they might need. But because of how much stuff we do, how many services we provide, you won't remember all those things. So I said, the second thing that I'm going to do is continually re-educate you as a client about everything we do, even the things that you will never need. I'm going to educate you on an ongoing basis. And I told them I do it for two reasons. Number one, I don't want you to have a problem, a need, a concern. that doesn't get addressed because you don't even know these things are here for you, but also people you care about might have problems, needs, and concerns that are different than yours. And I don't want them to not get help because you don't know those things are here for them. So periodically, I might sit down and ask your permission to kind of re-educate you, almost like you're not even a client, and tell you everything we do. So that's all I said. And you think about how simple that is. But it is such a profound, the industry uses cross-selling multiple products and blah, blah, blah. It's not about that. It's simply, I always use the analogy, I don't know if I did in the last ones, but like being at the grocery store. I find like cross-selling to me is walking down aisle number 1 and having the manager of the grocery store throwing products in my cart that I don't want. Like, it's annoying, right? But I find a lot of business owners and people do is you cover up the other 9 aisles, so I don't know to shop there, which is a very different thing. So to me, number 2 was about continually re-educating my client to reinforce why they chose us from a value proposition standpoint, but then also continually re-educate. So I never had a client buy something from someone else and then come to me and tell me, and I say, why didn't you come to us? And they said, well, I didn't know you did that. That's the worst single sentence you can ever hear from a client. I didn't know you did that.
That's it. When we've had the very first, I think it was the first video in this series, I brought up the exercise that our risk advisory team had gone through, and it's a little bit of a gut check because you mentioned it. We could rattle off everything we do in our own companies really well, but the exercise we had kind of gone through was, how likely we listed our top clients and how likely are they to refer you, et cetera. But you walk through how well do they actually know what it is across the board your company actually does, and how well would they be able to articulate that to a prospective, client of yours or somebody they would refer to. And it's really interesting how you can watch yourself kind of get that gut check, like, wow, they're likely to refer me. Yeah, I score that really high. By the time I get down to how well can they articulate what we do, my score's really low, and so that was interesting. I think I referenced that in the first call. And so thought I'd bring that back full circle because I think a lot of us could relate to, wow, how well do even my top relationships, our top relationships, know everything we do.
Well, and especially in industries, Andy, like what you guys are in and a lot of your clients are in. I've sat in your lobby there in Omaha. I've sat in your lobby in, I think it was Hastings. Beautiful building, beautiful lobby, beautiful, but all your products and services are invisible. Yeah. It's like I'm looking on a shelf going, oh, I didn't know that you sold that here. So if you're not describing invisible services to me on an ongoing basis, I can't know they exist. So I either don't get help in that area, or I go get the help from somebody that I perceive as delivering that invisible service. So really, really critical, especially if you're not in the product business.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. So there was three main elements. So what is the third?
Yeah, so the final thing, guys, and I'll tell you, again, people watching this, if you only listen to this and only rewind, do you even rewind anymore? I don't know how to.
Yeah, I think you just click on the little bar.
I don't know what you do. If you toggle back.
Toggle, yeah.
There you go. This one thing to me was the most important thing, the most important conversation I ever have with a client, because I told them my third objective is that not only do I want your experience to be so good that you don't want to leave as a client, but I want your experience to be so good that you would feel compelled to tell other people to get our help. If you care about people and you feel like they need help, I want your experience to be good enough that you would want them to get our help. However, that brings up a topic that for many people is uncomfortable: referrals, right? So I said, on one hand, every time I saw you, I could say, hey, who do you know? Do you know anybody? And you'll find that we don't do that. It's not comfortable for me or for you. But I've also learned that if I don't talk at all about it, I have clients that genuinely know people that need help, and they don't have clarity that we are absolutely here to help, that they are absolutely the kind of people we want to help, that, and that's bad because then people you care about might not get help. So I simply asked, having said all that, how can I bring that topic up to you, if at all? because if it is uncomfortable, I will never talk about it with you. How do I do it, though, in a way that's comfortable for you and will never compromise this relationship that we have? That is one of the most powerful questions you can ever ask. You notice that nothing I said had to do with help me build my business, the greatest compliment you can give me. None of that. It's all about being helpful to people and acknowledging this topic is weird for people, right? And I don't ever want awkwardness between you and I. I work too hard to earn trust as a client, but also I don't want people you care about to go unserved because I'm scared of a topic that's not scary, right, to you. So for me, the answer to that question, which, guys, you're going to find that 8 or 9 out of 10, it opens up an awesome conversation. Like, well, just talk to me about it. I mean, like, what kind of people are you trying to help? Like, this conversation about helping people, and you'll identify also the people that say, that's not a big thing for me. I don't really refer. It's kind of, I call them landmines. You're going to hurt the relationship if you talk about it, but it allows you to identify the gold mines that forever with that relationship, you don't have to be awkward anymore. You can, you think about if you could rewind Ellerbrock-Norris and look back all the years you've been in business. And if you knew that one answer to that question for every client and could have engaged in just honest, transparent conversation, think about how many people you'd be helping right now. So it was that. It was about identifying, by the way, most of the good clients you bring on that you're having this conversation with in the first place, guess how they came to your firm? Referral. Hopefully. Most of the time they're sitting in that chair because somebody they cared about cared enough about them to say, hey, look, you need help, go see these guys. So it's not that awkward most of the time.
Yeah, and I think that a couple things from that perspective, I think it's a snowball effect a little bit because you get, somebody got referred to you, and if they got referred to you because you had this conversation and you've prepared the client on how to give that referral and some of the stuff we talked about in the previous episodes, but it's been snowball effect, right? Because more people, more of your clients are then out talking to other people about your firm, and it becomes that snowball effect to build your business. But then number two, and what I would kind of echo across all episodes with this is the simplicity of the thinking of how you set this up. And I know that you've put a lot of work into doing it, so that wasn't an afterthought, but right. It gets you on the same page with the client. That's what I think is just so impactful. Does it in such a simple, non-threatening, non-salesy way that it's mostly genuine, like the conversation about how to ask you for a referral. It's like, hey, I genuinely just want to know if this is, number one, a conversation you're comfortable with having, and if so, how should we have it so that it's not awkward? Yeah. That's kind of just human to human communication, but we overcomplicate these things in sales a lot, and it's we've got to have like you mentioned, a couple of the ways that people will teach you to ask for a referral in the business. We got to have this, slick way to ask for it or whatnot. Like none of that stuff has to be that way. Make it simple, make it personable, make it, that human conversation. And I think most people genuinely react very positively to that.
Yeah. Elliot, the number one criticism I get, so I have for the last probably 10 years at least keynoted conventions. Remember when we had conventions where people got together?
Seems like 10 years ago, right?
Yeah. I keynote conventions literally all over the world, and the number one criticism I would get on that things was the content was which to me is a compliment, because what it takes to build strong relationships is very basic. It's not complicated. However, the content that I share is based on thousands of interviews with clients and them teaching me. It's not me pontificating what I think or what I believe. It's them telling me directly. So it is common sense. But the analogy I always give is that if eating healthy 5 days a week and going to the gym 5 days a week in an effort to be healthy is common sense. That's not, there's no news in fit. How do people even pay still for fitness content? But if you don't execute on common sense, you don't get the result of the common sense. So I think a lot of this is, you can write it off as, hey, this is simple. But if you don't really look at your own business and say, well, it's simple, but it's accurate with my business, and I've got to make modest changes to the way I interact to fix those things, you don't get the results. So yeah, I hope your clients, I hope your listeners take this stuff and don't just see it for its simplicity, but say, man, it would be really simple to fix the problem too.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's
And the last thing, Andy, I'll have, sorry, before you close, that I think it's key for everybody to understand is try it. It's going to be awkward. It's going to be different than you've normally done it. That's true to any new thing that you're going to do, but just try to go out and have this conversation with people. Do it genuinely and do it from the right place. And I guarantee after you get through that initial awkwardness of a couple times, it is going to drive results when you do it right. And so I think that's a good point to just make towards the end here.
Yep. No, that's spot on. And I had 4 words I'd written down to kind of wrap it all up that were, Elliot, you said it earlier, we got to build proactive strategies around asking for referrals. We've got to educate our team, educate our clients on the why behind it. We've got to communicate that and the plan. And then the last one was execute or try it, actually go out and do it. So great stuff, Dan. I mean, it's always fun to listen and hear from you and talk to you. And there's so many things to take away. I hope everybody that's watched these videos in this series is able to take a ton away. You know, Dan, you can share the best way to contact you. Go ahead right now if you want.
yeah, social media, all of my handles are just Daniel Craig, first name, middle name. Apparently there's an author named Daniel Allison that a bunch of books and stole my social media handles.
Awesome.
They can do that, or they can certainly email me if they want to ask questions. And that's dallison@bchlife.com. Boy, Charlie, Henry, life.com.
There you go.
Yeah,
There you go.
I've enjoyed it a ton. I know we're going to do some other ones in the future about different topics, and I'm excited about it.
Yep, absolutely. There will be more to come, so stay tuned. But for now, we will wrap up the series on how you build your business in the way we all want to, which is generating referrals. So go out and do it.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
Awesome.